If you're watching this video, you're already looking for a budget solution for a rear end for a 3rd or 4th gen Camaro. What if I told you that you could do one fairly cheap, not dirt cheap, but fairly cheap, and get by? If you have some tools, a little bit of fab skills, or a buddy that has some fab skills, I think that we can get by with building one for about the third of a price of what a 9-inch would go for. So let's give it a shot.
We're gonna start with a rear end out of an F-150. Now this is a Ford 8.8. I have no clue how many miles in it, and unfortunately, this one is an open differential.
The first step is stripping all the stuff we won't need off of this Ford 8.8. Now that's all stripped down, we're gonna put the axles back in it, and then I'm gonna measure a flange to flange width of this rear end to compare it to the 10-bolt.
Right at about 66.
Well, why that's important is because the stock F-body one from flange to flange is right around 64 3/4. So the good news is that one is too wide. So now we just have to figure out how narrow we want to cut it. Now we got our measurement and we know it's wide enough to work in an F-body. We're gonna have to cut down the tubes, but we need to get all these old brackets off. So we're gonna go ahead and take the torch, cut those brackets off. Now, the 8.8 tubes aren't very thick, so we can't really cut super close to the tube because we'll go right through it. So we're gonna cut some of the brackets off and then grind what's remaining.
Not the cleanest cuts. I was hoping I was gonna be able to get a little bit more flush, but I was just too nervous that I was gonna get too close to the tube.
But now I'll just get the angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. We'll knock the rest of that off, grind it smooth, and it should be good to go. All right, well, after some four-wheeler riding and some lawn mowing, we got these tubes all cleaned up. I found where the pinion location was on a stock 10-bolt because, well, as we spin around here, I actually have a car up on the hoist, and that's how I found out the center of it. So then I did some math after I located the pinion on this.
And in order to get the right pinion center line for the car, we just went ahead and marked it right there. You see it's right on the edge of this one and right here.
We're just trying to match the flange to flange measurement on this rear end, which just happens to be right around 59 1/8 or 59 1/4. I've found a lot of varying facts on the one that's in the shop. That one's 59 1/4, and I actually have one out back that was 59 1/8. Either way, we're going to try to split the difference here. Now I marked all these with a pipe fitting wrap, so I have a nice round or straight true line. We're going to cut the ends of them off.
Got the ends cut off pretty flush. Not too bad. But one of the interesting things I found, if you look in here, that's part of a bearing. So either we had a pinion bearing that came apart in this, or it came apart previously, and that was just left over. We need to deburr all this, but not too much because we don't want to change how those ends fit in there. We're going to go away from the C-clip style axle, and what we're going to do is put 9-inch ends on it. Now you can see I've had these for a while, because I've planned on this build for a while, and I just haven't gotten to it. Anyways, what we're going to do here is we're going to put these on right here. And now the bottom on these, you can get these from Strange or Mosier or Quick Performance, wherever you decide. But the bottom of this has a flat spot on it, and this is going to make it a little bit easier for locating the ends. And not only that, it's the right pattern for GM backing plates. So these have to go here. Now, as you can see, it'll tilt and side to side. So how are we going to get that end straight?
This is where it gets tricky, because yes, this is a budget build, but you are going to have to spend some money or find somebody that has a truing bar, just like I did.
I'm lucky enough that I have a buddy, Josh, that has a bar and the pucks made for an 8.8. He does Mustangs and F-bodies and all that, so I was able to borrow this. So we're going to have to put this in, set up the puck setup, and then that'll help us locate our ends on the tubes.
Now I just need to take my measurement, make sure that we are where we need to be. And we are perfect. I couldn't ask for it to be any better than that. Wow. Okay. Brought this rear end back inside, mainly because now it's close to the welder and we can get back to tacking all my brackets on, setting it up so we can set everything at the right degree. And yeah, makes things easier.
So truing bar's in it, torqued in. I have not tack welded my ends yet. Let's talk about these brackets. These brackets here are 1 of 1. My buddy Benjamin designed them. You can see that they're just kind of tacked up right now. And we're gonna use them as a prototype, fit them, see what we like, what we don't like.
And eventually, they might be available for sale to whoever wants to do this.
So in order to fit this, As you can see, my angle finder's over here. So in order to try to get all this right, what I did is I went ahead and I shimmed my pinion in order to set it directly at 90 degrees. And I checked it on both sides. I found that the back of the housing was the most reliable, but unfortunately my pinion bearing's a little wore in this.
After all that's set, we'll also use it to degree and level my spring purchase.
If you're wondering how I got the spacing right for my control arm brackets, I measured it off of that 10 bolt that's in that car.
I unfortunately am not going to give you all those measurements, not because I don't want you to steal them, but in case this doesn't work out or I need to make some changes, I don't want you to go, well, Austin's video said, because, well, it could be wrong.
All right, you've watched me tack all these brackets on. I came up with a little bit of a hiccup with our pan hard mount, which we kind of knew was going to be an issue. And then the other thing we had problems with was the spacing of our shock mounts from side to side. So I did freehand some of these brackets here to make them fit a little bit better.
And that's just the part of designing new brackets. They were really close. They just need a little bit of modification, which we'll now be able to update, or Ben will be able to update. And the next set should be much better.
The next thing we need to do is put some spring locators on it, both sides. I ended up going to the local scrapyard and I found that piece, which just happened to be the right OD to fit the spring. I cut them, cleaned them up, and we're gonna weld them there.
You guys have seen me tack weld and weld enough stuff, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put these locators on, weld the rest of these brackets up, and I'll be right back.
Brackets are welded on, locating cups are done. Now it's time to move on to the torque arm mount. You can see where I have this line here, and if you've looked at 8.8 builds, you know that I'm going to be using a Hilti mount. Mark's mount's been around for a long time. He provides awesome instructions on how to put it together.
It's been proven, it's been done a lot. I even think Hawk's 3rd gen uses that mount still. But as you can see, I've already welded it together. We just got to put it on.
I still got to grab some bolts and finish this part up. As you can see, I had tacked and then I just didn't like how it was looking, so I broke the tacks.
So I'll finish up fitting that on. I'll probably tack it on, and then I got to preheat the housing. They say it's cast steel, they say it's cast iron. Whatever it is, I've watched some videos, and I think the way to go is to weld it with some stainless steel wire. It has a higher nickel content, seems to work a lot better. So we'll preheat the whole center section to about 250 degrees, maybe 300, and then we'll weld.
Preheated it with the torch, welded it with stainless wire, 308. Now I've wrapped it in the welder's blanket, and we're gonna let this cool down slowly. So that looks nice and sturdy. I did leave this bolted up, and then obviously I worked around the housing here. Now we just need to weld our 9-inch ends on. These, as I showed earlier, they have a nice flat spot on them. So I set my pinion angle back at 0. I'm coming back here, and you can see I already made my marks to get this as close as I can to have them also at 0. So to put them down here, we'll look close enough. So I'm going to tack weld these.
And after they're tack welded, the goal is to keep that true bar so it can still spin freely after it's welded.
All right, got them welded in. As you can see, the bar spins nice and free. Definitely not my prettiest welds, but they're just gonna have to do. After I removed the truing bar, I went ahead and put the carrier back in it, put the pin back in.
Now I'm gonna measure to the carrier pin.
You can see I got my tape measure in there. I'm gonna grab my measurement.
Now I measure for my axles. And I'm not gonna give those measurements to you, just like I said earlier in the video. I'm not even sure if they're right, but I am gonna order that length, and then I will have a part 2 of this video when we're fitting the rear end, seeing if everything fits up right, and if it works.
Rolling it up onto the hoist, and I've just kind of came to the realization if I'm ever gonna get to where I put that 8.8 in, I'm gonna have to take a break from that SS Resurrection and just go ahead and get right to that car. I haven't painted that 8.8 yet, and one of the reasons is I'm still making some adjustments on it. As I said in the initial video when I was building it, those are prototype brackets. There's a couple things that were off on them, and I went ahead and fixed it. So even though I have the axles ordered for it, which should be correct, I hope, I really hope, I've decided that I'm gonna go ahead and pull the rear end out of that Z28 of mine and go ahead and fit that. So we'll slide the axles in, we'll see if all the brackets bolt up and it sits where it needs to sit. And then if it does, which I'm really hoping it does, for both my sake and your guys's, if you're watching this and want to decide how to do it yourself, but if it does fit all right, we'll go ahead and unbolt the control arms, zip it back out, and then we'll go ahead and clean it all up, spray it with primer, and get it painted. But that's way in the future, so hopefully it happens. Oh man, that's not gonna work. I got those fancy lug nuts. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put this up in the air, and my goal is to hopefully find a way to get all the calipers and brake lines hung off of this rear end without actually breaking the system. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but I'm gonna try, mainly because, well, it'd be a lot nicer just to slap these calipers on and not have to worry about bleeding brakes. Now that this thing's up in the air, we can take a look at the brakes. Like I said, I was hoping to get them off of this rear end without having to break the system. I think I can weasel this one around here this way, but I do want to point out that these brake lines are extremely rusty, and actually even some of the brackets that used to hold this on are rusted off. This car sat outside for 15 years and never moved, and all that time it was sitting over grass where moisture was coming up and rusting all the nuts and bolts on this. So first things first, we should get some penetrating oil, or maybe we'll even be able to take out these springs right now. Yeah, I'll get that in a second. Now, if you have stock springs, they are not gonna come out like that. These are some BMR lowering springs, so they're just kind of sitting loose in there. Pretty easy to get out. Just like that. Now we're almost done. Not really. I'm gonna take this panhard bar out here, I think, maybe. Perfect. Now, these panhard bolts are actually really unique to the F-body. You can see they have that large step on them because these holes are stepped. You have the larger one and then the smaller one. And I'm actually really glad to see this is adjustable. I didn't think it was. Good news is we'll be able to center the rear end. So that's swung out of the way, and we are gonna continue our quest. There's this around the brake lines. Gotta find something to tie that up real quick. Oh man, I need to get some bump stops on this. I'm going through the bump stop hole right here. The bump stops fell off years ago, but man, did I find some carnage from not running them. Especially after I lowered the car. It's not good. And this side should be easier to finagle around, mainly because I don't have as large a control arm bracket to go through. And for what I thought was maybe a caliper leaking, actually wasn't at all. Get this rotor off. Kind of tough to tell with the shadow, but this is all gear oil rather than brake fluid, which is good because that means there's no brake lines to fix as of right now. I want to get this out tonight, but I don't think it's going to happen. It's almost 8 o'clock. I got to get up at 3:30 for work, so I'm going to pause it here, and hopefully tomorrow night I'll get the rest of the way pulled out. Hopefully this is the last bolt. Now, oh, that's going to come out nice. Perfect. Now, one of the cool things, you see this control arm right here, it's silver and it says UMI Performance. UMI only made silver control arms for a couple of years. When they first came out, all their stuff was silver, and then they went to the traditional red and black. So the fact that this has some of the UMI's first performance parts on it is pretty neat. Looks like it's gonna clear. And I was able to get this lifted up and leave all the brake lines intact, so that's mission accomplished. Now I want to be clear, I'm fairly certain that the only way to make this look good when we put this new 8.8 in here is going to be to rebend all these brake lines. But you have to keep in mind, this is a test fit. And if this thing doesn't fit or it's not going to work out, I don't want to have to break the system or have all the lines taken off, or I'm going to have to run them all new again. If it fits, we'll probably make new ones for it. Lift with your back, guys. So much lighter without axles. Let's set this pinion up. Lowered the car back down a little bit. Shocks are lining up. Springs look like they're going to line up, but one of the things, you can also see my spring cups are just tack welded on here. It's because I've been having to move them a little bit because I had my measurements wrong initially, but that's why this is a trial and error, right? Anyways, what I was bragging about earlier with those lowering springs was with those factory brackets, I could just pull right out. With my taller spring cups here, I'm not gonna be able to do that. Oh, for some reason it's come forward a little bit. So we got that one. I'm gonna go line up the other side, put the spring on, hopefully get that panhard bolted on, and see how things fit. Rear end's in. Panhard bolt did not want to go in, mainly probably because I need to lengthen that panhard bar. I think with any aftermarket rear end, and especially if the car is lowered, that it's a mandatory thing to have an adjustable panhard bar. Now I know this pinion flange looks really close to the exhaust, and it is, but when the rear end raises up, when the car's sitting on the ground, it's gonna be up in this area and we'll have plenty of clearance. The torque arm's more what I'm worried about. What I was talking about earlier when I said I'll show you some carnage, I didn't have bump stops on it, and the torque arm bracket definitely punctured a hole in the rear end tunnel. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and throw the carrier pin in, and we'll grab the axles and see how everything fits. To be honest with you, I've had these axles for months. Really about a week after I posted the first 8.8 build video, I went ahead and ordered them. QP's local to me. They've been a great company to work with over the years. They're who built the 9-inch that's in my other car, and then with this car, they did the axles, and they had them same week. You got the bearings on here. Now, obviously, they don't press the bearings on because you're gonna need to press those on after you put your backing plates on. Now, I am not gonna press the bearings on these quite yet. I wanna see how they fit. And then we'll get a flange to flange measurement to make sure that they're the same width as what my original rear end was. Let's see if we can't fish this through here and get a flange to flange measurement. So right now I'm just under 64. I'd call it 64 even. And this one is at 64 3/4. But we're gonna keep in mind that you know, I got 3/4 of an inch difference. We're nowhere close to having the bearings on there. If we're gonna make sure we got the width right of this thing, we're gonna need to put the bearings on these. If you get your axle shafts from Quick, there's this little spacer here, and this thing is only used if you're using 93 to 97 LT1 brakes. So we'll go ahead and put that on. Then we're gonna need our backing plate. And for these, you wanna make sure that you get them in the right direction. So luckily, I can see where the stock flange was. So I'm gonna put that down right there. Bearing wise, the O-ring needs to be towards the face of the axle. Last, there's a locking collar. Typically you'd have some notch blocks in these for bearing pressing. My press did not come with those, so I'm kind of making do with the splitter. So I'm going to leave this retainer out for now. We will put that on. First, we're going to go ahead and get the bearing pressed in. So before we slide that axle in, I need to clean this out, make sure we don't have any rust in it. And then also, I'm going to put the seal in. Should be able to slide this part right in. The next thing a guy's going to need is some T-bolts. And man, thankfully they've changed their T-bolts a little bit. These flanges used to be a lot thinner. Like so. I'm going to go ahead and tighten these up, and I'll do the other side, and I'll be right back. Okay, got the other axle in. I have not tightened up the backing plate yet, mainly because it's going to make it a lot easier for me to measure flange to flange. We need to take that measurement, make sure that we're where we need to be. All right, let me hook this flange. I'll bring it across. We'll stick a parallel on there for good measure. Pun intended. Okay, 64, not quite 3/4. We are very close. It'd be 64, and I believe that's 11/16, right? 8, 9, 10, 11, yes. So, 64 and 11/16. That means we are only a 1/16 of an inch difference from what that rear end is. And I think that'd be within tolerance, at least in my book. That 1/16 of an inch isn't going to affect wheel clearance or anything like that. So now we need to look at the torque arm clearance. And I would say our test fit will be successful after this. So I've just put this tunnel mount torque arm in just roughly. And right now it is obvious if we come over here that we would hit the tunnel. Let's see if I can go. So we would definitely hit the tunnel where that seatbelt mount is. But on this, we have 2 sets of bolts that we could go out. And what we could do is trim this bracket off right here, and it would move us in over 1 inch, which should clear that tunnel. You might have to do a little bit, of massage right up in this area, but that's gonna clear. What I think I might do is take that tunnel mount out and go outside and see if I have a stock factory torque arm in the scrap pile, and maybe we'll try running it and see how it fits. How about that? There is one. With a red Camaro door, Adele. Oh, I just stepped in a bunch of mud. That'll work. I'd love to say hoarding, we won't say hoarding, collecting all these Camaro parts is kind of a great thing, and it's what you typically work on. But man, does it kind of look janky out here. I've slowly been scrapping and getting rid of a lot of it. I'm glad I hung on to this to try it out. All right, I went ahead and threw that stock torque arm in it. You can see it's in the right place up at the transmission. Here, our holes are basically lined up. You can see how much further it sticks out here, mainly because how the torque arm bracket has to be. But there is definitely more clearance up here. It's gonna be very close. So here's a shot from the bottom side to give you an idea how close that is. And if I were to take my hand, it goes straight up and down. So really it's just this area that needs to be clearanced. So even with the stock rear end, you can see right in the tunnel right here is where that UMI torque arm was rubbing. So with the stock torque arm, you're gonna have to clearance the tunnel just a little bit. Use the BFH, just slightly massage it. But look guys, that's nothing new. As you can see, that thing was rubbing with the stock 10 bolt and that UMI torque arm. So obviously the car has been lowered a little bit with the BMR 125 springs. That's no big deal. I have yet to put a rear end in one of these, a 12 bolt, a 9-inch, an 8/8, that you haven't had to modify the tunnel just a little bit. And to be honest, this is interfering with the tunnel a lot less than what my 9-inch does. So the next thing I'm gonna do is loosely bolt the brakes up to this, and that way we can put the tires back on it, set it on the ground, see how it looks. Wheels are bolted on. I still have this thing on the hoist a little bit because I wanted to show you that they do go without rubbing. Both sides. You can see that factory width is working right. I might have to adjust the panhard bar just a little bit. I'm sticking out a little far on this passenger side. I don't think I can ask for a better fitment than what we have right here. Everything really bolted up nice. The springs went where they needed to go. The lower control arms were perfect. The panhard bar fit. Everything looked really good. It bolted right in. There's a couple things I noticed as we bolted in. I don't have sway bar mounts, so I'm gonna have to make some of those. There's some small modifications we're gonna have to make on the brackets themselves. Where they're at now, they're 100% functional. Now I've pulled it back out and I've wire brushed it all, wiped it down with wax and grease remover, and it's ready to paint. As bad as I wanted to have this thing sandblasted and spray it with some good epoxy primer and give it a good paint, or maybe even have it powder coated, nah, I'd paint it. And I'll explain to you why here in a second. It makes the most sense to give this a rattle can job. And the reason why I'd rather rattle can the undercarriage of a car or use Rust-Oleum there or on a rear end is because of rock chips. It's so much easier to smooth out and sand a rock chip and paint it with some Rust-Oleum than it is to try to blend some powder coat. Because I was able to take this used 8/8 and reuse the axle tubes that were originally in it, they naturally have some pitting just because of rust and the age. So to be honest with you, sandblasting this rear end probably would have been the best option, but I'm using what I have here in the shop. But since I have all those pits, I'm gonna go ahead and use some rust converter or rust reformer, and that way we can kind of convert and hopefully stop any of the rust in the pits here, and also that center section that all I could do was really wire brush. This rust converter is actually pretty thin, and it's gonna take a couple light coats to do it. The other downfall of it is this stuff stinks pretty bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my mask. I gotta paint this, let it sit for about 12 hours or at least overnight, and then we can get to our main paint. Now that I have all that in primer, and then I actually took time to read the can, it looks like this is supposed to drive for 24 hours before I can put any base coat on it. Does anyone really wait 24 hours before putting a base coat on rattle can? No. Next day, got this primer all laid out. Looks pretty dang good. I actually kind of like the look of that matte black, but instead I'm gonna go with this gloss black. I've always just felt that gloss paints are a little bit stronger, and they definitely wash a lot easier. But actually, for just being wire brushed and Scotch-Brite wheeled. It looks pretty darn good. I just went ahead and put this light coat on there. We're gonna let that tack up. Here in a couple minutes, we'll lay another one. Probably put 3 coats on this, make that last one pretty heavy so it's nice and shiny. All painted up, now this thing's ready to go back in. But before I put that back in, I really want to fabricate something different for the torque arm. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Coming over to this stock 10 bolt, if we were to go center to pinion to the center of this torque arm bolt, that's about 2 1/4 inches, roughly. Now when you come back over to this 8/8, if you come center pinion to center of the torque arm bolt, that's now 3 1/4 inch. 1 inch difference on those is actually kind of normal for all aftermarket rear ends. So common, in fact, that torque arms usually come with holes to offset that difference. And I could probably cut the inner set of holes off of that and it would work for me just fine. But here's the problem. Even using the stock location in that UMI torque arm lowered, you can tell that it's been hitting so hard that it punctured a hole in this. And you can see all the damage it's already done in the tunnel and how much it rubs. So where I'm going with this is I'm going to fabricate a new torque arm bracket that's going to move that torque arm over just a little bit. Not a whole lot, but hopefully enough where it'll clear a lot better so I don't have to take a giant hammer to it. You guys know me, always on a budget. So I went out to the scrap yard and I found this cutoff that somebody had dumped. Looks like it's from a laser table. Just happens to be about the right width of what we're going to need. I need to make sure that this bracket right here clears the pinion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend these plates out just a little bit and move this bracket about 1/4 inch forward. We're at roughly 6 1/4. So I want to make this bracket 6 1/2. Just got those marked. So we're going to say this is front and top. Now I would love to say that I zeroed this in and centered this drill bit, but I didn't. Got these cut out. One thing that's kind of odd about it is these were magnetized. So as I was cutting it, all the chips just stuck to it. But we'll see if we can just get the bolts to drop in these. I went ahead and grabbed my drive shaft flange. You can see I actually might have centered those bolts a little too much because I originally wanted to put a piece of bar stock right here. That's not going to work. So we'll end up moving them around just a little bit. The goal is to get it as close to this pinion flange as possible. Now, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. Building this is completely unnecessary. But I just have a problem wanting to fabricate stuff. And I also don't like cutting stuff up. I'm not saying that I'll ever go back to the 10 bolt, but what if I want to? Now I have the torque arm side cut and drilled, and one of the things that we're gonna have to do is get this thing taken off and over to the welding table so I make sure I can weld these flush. I'm telling you this right now, this is a lot of work to save 3/16 of an inch clearance. Yeah, something like that. Now, I'm gonna have to go backwards a few steps because I thought it was as simple as welding that up, but clearly I can't read a tape measure. So now I need to cut a couple more of these and drill some new holes because I'm an idiot. Now I fixed the problem, and what I ended up doing wrong is I actually put it at 4 3/4 spacing when that needed to be at 4 1/4 spacing. Now the right way to fix that probably would have been to grab more material, drill new holes in them, and start over. There's a problem with that though. This is all the material I had left, and I could have made 2 pieces out of this, but with having to machine all of this and then get this the same width, because these are 2 different ones, it was gonna be way more work than it was worth to try to utilize that piece. And it was 9 o'clock at night. I had to do something. So what I ended up doing is moving a 1/4 inch over, opening this up with a 3/4 inch bit, and then I inserted these nuts that are for a 5/8 bolt. Welded those in, and then I might have got carried away and cut this with a fly cutter and smoothed it all out. And then on the other side, I closed up the holes with the welder and then also smoothed those out. Now you don't need a mill or anything to fix this type of stuff. This could have been done with a grinder and opened the holes up with a die grinder, but I have it here. I'm gonna use what I got. And right here's the final fit. And you come over to this side, you can see that the bolt heads are flush. The right way is to have a few threads sticking out of there, but because we're trying to make some more clearance, we're gonna keep those flush to where those nuts are welded at. So I'm gonna get back to putting this rear end in, and hopefully I get this thing moving again today. All right, guys, moment of truth on this torque arm bracket. And maybe, yeah. Now I got all that in, I've just been tightening things up, but I have some good news. We have more clearance now than we had with that UMI torque arm on the stock rear end. Now I'm not saying that I'm not gonna have to clearance it. We'll still see when we get on the ground and install the pinion angle, but as of right now, it's looking pretty promising. Now, as I'm tightening everything up here, I do have a problem. I don't have a place to mount my sway bar. The factory just looked like an exhaust clamp. And I just don't think I can get the spacing right with a 3 1/4 clamp. So I'm gonna need to make some sway bar mounts. I have an idea what I'm gonna do, but even with that, I can't weld the sway bar mounts on unless it's on the ground on all 4 tires. Now, when I get to the end of this video, I'm gonna go through kind of some frequently asked questions I've had on it. And also, if you've made it this far in the video, please hit subscribe. Helps me out a ton, costs you nothing, and really helps motivate me to keep posting content. All right, back to that. One of the things I decided to do was drill some holes in my control arm brackets, and I tapped them. That way I can use these factory brake line supports. Next thing I have to figure out is what I'm gonna do for a differential cover. I originally planned on just running the stock cover and then welding a bung in it for the fill and level. And I actually had already bought the plug and everything. But after thinking on it, I think this is one thing I'm gonna splurge on just a little bit. Mainly because I can get these for dirt cheap online. I think it was like $55 or $60, something like that. It's all relative to what you're saying is cheap. But for me, I think this is gonna be worth it. What I ended up doing is I went ahead and drilled this and tapped it for an 1/8 inch pipe thread, put a plug there, and then I'll pull this out when I check my level, and it should have a slow drip from there when I fill it. How I figured out to locate it right there is the fill plug on the other side was just slightly above this bottom hole for the low side. So that's kind of how I picked it up. This might be a touch too high, but it should be close enough. I really only need 2 more things in order to get this thing back down on the ground. And that's a cross pin bolt for the carrier that I somewhere misplaced, and a conversion U-joint for the drive shaft. But here's where I'm gonna come clean about something. I have built an 88 before, back in 2009. That build can be found on LS1 Tech. But as I was looking for what conversion U-joint to use, I actually remembered that on that forum, I probably posted it. So I went there and I scrolled through all my old notes, and I had showed 355, but I was using a car pinion flange. So I noted like 16 years ago that the truck and car pinion flanges were different. And I don't remember what exactly sizes or the U-joint is for the other one. But then it made me start to think, is the car pinion flange way smaller? And it turns out it would be. This one is actually 5 inches, and it turns out that the car one is 4 5/16. So I could have ran a car one, moved this further over, and had more clearance. Too late now. The good news is running this truck one, everything's spaced out to run a 1350 yoke if I ever want to convert it to a standard pinion yoke. Yeah, that might happen. Those things are like $100. I think you might be able to find them cheaper a little bit. Doesn't matter now. This is what we're using because we're on a budget. My local parts store didn't have the right U-joint that I needed. I believe that there's a correct U-joint that I need. That's about 35 minutes away. I'm gonna go pick it up. Hopefully it'll work. If not, well, I guess I'm gonna have to wait a few days until one shows up. Put that U-joint in. It was a 447 U-joint. And that would be for use with the truck flange, with the Explorer flange. And then the stock drive shaft should work. You can see how much space we have with it pushed in the transmission right there. It's getting closer to being on the ground, but I almost forgot. I need to do something about these bump stops. So I got this side all bolted up, but I'd be lying to you to say that I didn't have to do a little bit of cutting to make these bump stops fit. There's a couple companies that make direct replacements. I could get these polyurethane ones for 20 bucks off of Amazon. And in order to make them fit, you have to cut this little lip off right here. Now you might notice I didn't put the spacer on it that's originally their stock. And that's because the car's lowered, and I'm hoping that this will still save the drive shaft tunnel. There we go, torqued. Now it's just time to throw the wheels back on this, set it down on some ramps, that we can set the pinion angle, and then address our sway bar mount issue. Once the car got on the ground, I went ahead and set the pinion angle, which was really close. So now I put it at -2, and moving to the sway bar mounts. What I ended up doing is I took some rectangular steel and then I cut it in 2 like that. And then I made the half moons in them. So this is actually a 3 1/4 tube that I pressed out of an Explorer housing. Got something coming on that next, just to make sure that they fit. So now I'm gonna go ahead and mark them for the sway bar clamps, get them drilled so we can weld them on. That's kind of the nice thing about spray painting a rear end versus spraying it with any type of epoxy or having it powder coated, is if you need to add anything to it, you can weld on it and touch it up with spray paint. Got these where I made sure that they're gonna be equal on there. They're same height. I marked which way because they are not quite symmetrical. If I put them this way, I just made myself a liar. They are symmetrical. Now they're not. Now they are. Now they're not. Oh, anyways, here we go. I don't even need them on this half moon thing. What am I doing? Get that out of here. Okay. Center it up. Some coloring time. Looks good to me. Now that those are done, we need to figure out where to locate them on this. So I'm gonna go from the edge of my control arm bracket to here. We got roughly 6 inches. These are about 1.5 inches, so 6 inches minus 3/4. So I'll get under there and I'll measure from my control arm bracket to, what was it, 5 1/4, and I'll mark it, and that'll be the edge. I actually might move it to like 5.5 just to give me a little leeway. Those brackets being further inward won't hurt this thing at all. So you can see here, I couldn't decide where I wanted to be. So this one was actually right at the 5 1/4, and this one was at the 5.5. This one was at the 6 inch, where was the center of the bracket. So I have an idea where I need to clean the paint off of. Speaking of paint, I'd be a lot further ahead right now if I decided I didn't have to paint everything. I couldn't put a rusty old sway bar on, so I went ahead and painted it silver to match the rest of the UMI stuff. But then you can't have rusty old sway bar brackets, so I had to paint those. While I was under there building this rear end, the exhaust was just atrocious. I mean, it was gross. So this muffler that came off really easy, as you can see, all the packing's out of it. And I just so happened to have a direct replacement off my other car. So I did the right thing and sanded it all down and painted the tailpipes and also painted the other muffler. And then I painted the rest of the cat back because, I don't know, I have a problem. So as that all dries, I'm gonna get under there, clean off some paint so I can tack weld these brackets, and then hopefully we can get to wrapping this thing up. Went ahead and put that girdle cover on. I still gotta set those support screws, but I also welded on the sway bar mounts. And I'm not too happy about them, but they worked out, they're where they need to be, and they're gonna stay. I am not an out of position welder, and this shows it. It is ugly. I'm actually almost too embarrassed to show it to you, but you know what? I just think it's super important to know that everybody on here is not perfect at doing things. This one actually turned out to be about the best one, and it's ugly. There's the next worst one, and that's awful. And then, oh no, I don't want to show you anymore. That's terrible. To be honest with you, I really want to redo them all. It's time to wrap this project up. And if that thing ever comes out where it's on the ground, I will grind those down and re-weld them. They are going to hold. They're just fine. It's welded. It just kind of sucks it turned out like that because overall I was really happy with all the welding that was on the rear end. What am I doing? I'm so flustered by these bad welds, I forgot to paint it. Okay. Well, I would love to say a little bit of paint will make the welder I ain't, but there ain't nothing fixing that. A lot of people think that these take all types of torque. It's really not that much. It's only like 5 foot-pounds. If you were to tighten it up too tight, then you'd end up putting too much preload or too much pressure on the bearing caps or the carrier bearings, and you distort that cap. So really it's just enough to keep them from expanding out. We'll still go back and forth evenly on them. There's that one. All right, sway bar mounts. As much as I wanted all the welding to be perfect, really that's the only thing I'm unhappy about. I think I'll survive. The other thing I had to do is I had to order a vent for the axle tube. The factory axle tube has a barb in it for the truck that this came out of, and I'm going to get more of a one that you'd see in a 10 bolt for it. So it's 1/8 inch NPT. I forget the part number. I'll put it in the description. So there we have it. Sway bar's on, cover's on, 8/8 is fully installed, brakes are there and working, pinion angle is set, torque arm clearance is okay. All I have left to do is put some PTFE paste on the threads of the cover for the drain plug, that way it doesn't leak, fill it full of fluid, and then I need to adjust the panhard bar just a little bit. I'm about 1/4 inch off. My plans today were to actually take it for a drive. Here in Iowa on Monday, we had this like 72-degree day. I put a control arm on my pickup out in the driveway, and less than a week later, we're in a blizzard. Yeah. So needless to say, I won't be driving this thing today. That's okay. I got a couple other issues. I got to adjust the clutch pedal in it, and then I should be able to take it for a test drive this upcoming week. I'd be lying to you if I told you I haven't put some miles on it. I got about 80 miles on it so far, and things have been going pretty well. I'm going to take this thing for a cruise. I'm going to answer a lot of the questions you guys have asked in the comments. And yeah, we'll just decide if this is something you'd want to do for you and if it's worth it. Originally, I wanted to include you guys on the initial drive, but the last couple days we've had some gorgeous weather, and I just wanted to drive it and get it out. I didn't really want to worry about videoing, but now here's the perfect opportunity to do it. I will say the 80 miles I've driven this thing has been pretty decent. So my impressions of it, and this is from me owning these cars for the last 20 years, and as originally, as the cars came with, I had a 10 bolt with 410 gears that I pulled out of an S10, and that was back in like 2007, somewhere around there. And then I upgraded to building my own 8/8 with 10 bolt axle tubes, stock brackets stuck inside of a Lincoln Town Car rear end. I ran the 28 spline Mustang posi carrier and used the factory axles. A lot of people ask, can I use factory axles if I do it that way? I would say the answer is no. I did do it for a couple of years, but the problem is the button for the C-clip on it is about 100 thousandths too short on the factory axles for what the 8/8 carrier requires. And I don't think it'd be safe to weld on the button of that axle and have it hold up. So yes, people do that all the time. I don't really recommend it. If you were to use stock 10 bolt axle tubes, I would still order axles and have them made. Well, let's start from the beginning of a lot of you guys' questions are. So what did the rear end come out of? I don't exactly know for this series. And to be honest, I was at the salvage yard and there was a rear end laying on the ground in the F-150s. It measured right around 65 inches, 66, somewhere around there, and that's what I needed. So that's what I bought. From the research I've done, it was either out of a early 90s F-150 or a Ford E-150, an Econoline. This rear end was built out of 2 rear ends, actually. It was, the housing itself was out of the truck, I believe, and then the posi unit was out of a Ford Explorer rear end that I initially bought. The big thing was to make sure that it had the ABS sensor in the top, and that it had the 3 bolt holes up on the side of the pinion that the torque arm mount could bolt to. So that brings to the next question. What's the torque arm mount? The torque arm mount is actually a Hilti torque arm mount that you can find on eBay. They're about 70 bucks, and that's what I use. They've been used for a lot of years. They've been super successful. I think even Hawks uses that mount, so that's what I've been going with. Next question. Can the stock drive shaft be used? In my experience so far, yes. On both 8/8s I've built, the stock drive shaft can be used, and even if you were to go with a 9-inch, the stock drive shaft can be used. If you're running a stock LS1 drive shaft, I have broke 2 of those. I would really suggest an aftermarket drive shaft or to stick with your steel LT1 drive shaft for now. And this one, I'm running a 1LE drive shaft. This car's a little different. It is a heads cam car with LT4 heads, but I've always had it on street tires, and I'm not really someone that beats on my stuff all the time. Let's see, where do I get the ends for it? So the ends on this rear end for the outside of the axles where they bolt to are 9-inch ends, and they are GM brake bolt pattern. You can buy those typically from Mosier. I think Strange has them. but that's where I got them, and they're for 3-inch or 3 1/4 inch tube. So I put them on there, a 3 1/4 inch tube. They butt welded right up next to it, so that worked out really well. Now, got some railroad tracks here. Got to go over. I'll tell you, since I centered the rear end in this and put the bump stops on, it rides so much better. That is one of the things I'll like talk about. Is it rides a lot better with this rear end in it. I don't necessarily think it's the rear end that's making the ride quality improved. I do think it's a big part of building that torque arm bracket that I did to get it to stop hitting the tunnel. That was a huge deal. Anyways, let's get with traffic here. The posi feels a lot different in this thing compared to the 10 bolt. But let's get back to it. The $1 million question that you all have been asking is about the brackets. Are they available? That's really not, that ball's not in my court anymore. My buddy Benjamin that's drawing them up, he's been working on it, he's been refining the design a little bit, we're making some improvements, and really I think it's going to come down to getting a pre-order and ordering them, because I will be honest with you, it is not very cost effective to order one set at a time from Syncut Send. The file is not going to be for sale, I'll tell you that right now. But order one set of brackets. Honestly, it's not much cheaper than what you could go to Midwest Chassis and buy a set of them for. And if you go, to give you an idea, you go to Midwest Chassis, a set of rear end brackets for an F-body are $400. Racecraft used to make them, I think, for $375. I do think our brackets would be a little bit less. I'm not going to say that they're going to be like hundreds of dollars less. But anyways, they worked out really good for us. But let's talk about that on brackets. I think if you really wanted to shave a large cost off of building this rear end, if you had access to a plasma cutter and you cut the bracket off of the stock 10 bolt and spent some time with a sanding disc, you could open them up for the axle tube and utilize those, and that would save you, well, we'll just say roughly $400 right off the top. And that's a huge deal. What did the rear end cost me to build? Now you got to keep in mind, I had $250 in the rear ends. I bought $100 for that housing of the F-150. I paid $150 for the Explorer with the posi unit in it. I had $30 or $40 in stainless wire to weld it on. So we're just kind of going, the axles I think were right at $450. Had to get a couple seals, and let's top this off. I want to talk about how much of a budget this was. I actually reused all the bearings from the carrier, the pinion, everything. This has all used bearings in it, not a single new one. The only thing that was new in this was the pinion seal. So that being said, I mean, you can wrap up a couple $100 in bearings easy. So with me using all used stuff that I inspected, of course, I ended up with about $1,300 in this rear end doing it myself. If you figure the labor in, it's actually probably cheaper to go with a quick performance 9-inch. And I actually have one of those in the other cars. I've stated in the videos before. I really prefer the 8.8. It's quieter. It just seems to drive better. It's lighter. The pinion location being a little higher up makes it for a quieter gear operation. So my preference is an 8.8. The other reason why it's my preference is I like to build stuff. And it's pretty rewarding when I built this and it's working out great. So I guess the bottom line is it worth it? I guess that's relative in what your time means for you. I think that you could build one of these in 1 or 2 weekends. If you took your time measuring, getting everything cleaned off, welding it up, getting it installed, I think that you really could. Now that depends if you're going to put new bearings in stuff and set up all the gears. But for me personally, it was worth it. I mean, $1,300. Really, I think the cheapest 9-inch you can put together right now, even if you went with a spool, is probably around $2,300, somewhere on there. So you're still at $1,000 savings. If your 2 weekends to you is worth $1,000 and a decent posi and really great drivability, then I would say it's worth it. There's a couple other companies out there building 8.8s, and I'm sure they make a good product, but I can't justify what they're charging for them. Not when you can get a 9-inch for like what we just talked about. Well, hi there. finally, I want to talk about the deciding factor for me to actually build an 8.8 for this thing. One, it's because I wanted to see if I could do it using a stock housing and not have to stick 10-volt tubes inside something, even having to try to put new tubes in a rear end housing. It was really the fact that my 10-volt needed rebuilt. I was going to have about $500 rebuilding that 10-volt, and at this point, why throw $500 or $600 in something that's a ticking time bomb? So I just decided to go ahead and pull the trigger, try to build this 8.8. I was pretty confident it worked. I've been here before. Would you make up your mind if you want to be in the front seat or back seat? I will turn this thing around. No, I won't. So justification for me was really just the fact that it was spending an additional $700 or $800 to get a good rear end in this that I don't have to worry about. Final takeaway though, pretty happy with it. And this thing is so quiet and it rides so much better that I'm not scared to drive this thing anywhere at this point. And with that cost of about $1,300, you have to remember I actually borrowed a alignment bar or a truing bar with the pucks from a friend. I'm not sure what those cost offhand. Obviously, I would try to find a hot rod shop that builds some rear ends or a stock car shop that builds some rear ends and see if you couldn't rent their setup and their puck setup to help do this. So from this point on, I'm kind of done talking about this project here, but if you comment below, I'll still answer your guys' questions. I do have another 8.8 that I've been kind of on the fence if I want to do a video series over. I pressed the axle tubes out of it, and I'm going to put new axle tubes in it. I'll put the updated brackets on that one as well, and it's going to be basically the same thing except all new. Now the reason why I'm not really posting that on here is it's truly not a budget build. That thing's not taking all used stuff and slapping it together and trying to build something for under $1,500. But success, under $1,500, upgraded rear end. I can beat on this thing confidently now and not worry about, being stranded on a road trip. But thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate you guys following along on this build. I really appreciate your patience the most because it did take me 9 months to finish this up. I've just had so much going on that it took a while. But yeah, comment below any other questions, or if you guys want to see that all new 8.8 build that I'm going to do for the other car. And as always, please like and subscribe and comment. That's a huge deal right now. Comment for me, guys. And I want to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your questions. That really helps motivate me to continue on. And I'll see you in the next video.